Actually, what? This is one.
Speaking up.
Mark, are you bringing us good news today?
Sure, absolutely. A small increase.
That's all.
Yeah. Small increase.
Do you want to stay for the solid waste discussion?
No.
Can I go with you?
What time will you be doing that?
We can do that first if you want, if you want to stay. After your presentation, if it's okay with the board, we can talk about solid waste after Mark's presentation.
You got a presentation today?
Yeah, just what, yeah. No, there was an increase to just basically the $1 an hour that you have so graciously given us.
Mandate without compensation.
Yeah.
Mandate without compensation.
Yeah.
Famous unfunded mandate that we all love so much.
Yes.
What Mr. Wanda said, but she wasn't really asking, she was telling.
No, I think that's right, yeah. Sure, I'll hang around.
Have you hadn't had any, part of the checks in your account?
No, I've had some fraudulent, really,
Making fake checks and trying to catch one.
on your account, on the clerk's account. No, I had one about 6, 7 years ago. A guy from New York called me, he had like $40,000 on my check, and, sending iPhones to South Africa. He said, "You're not sending an iPhone to South Africa, are you?" I said, "Nope." I got it, but then I had to change everything, but that's the only, knock on wood, that's the one that I've had. Yeah, so I got some redemption here, it was pretty spot on, everything but the signature. Yeah, I mean, and the signature was real close. Yep. But I've had credit cards on my footprint.
Thank you very much.
I have 2,000. They're all the same. And, I mean, they didn't go through their decline. But, somebody would, I guess they were trying to see if the credit card was working.
You know, Capital City.
Oh, really? This happened while we were still at Citizens, one that I had. I haven't had, now there's a thing that they made me do over at Capital City called, yeah, positive pay.
Okay. Stand for the prayer and please. Father in heaven, we're here again. Thank you right now for your blessings. Ask your blessing upon us as we make decisions. Bless our citizens. We thank you right now, Lord, for things being as well as they are. We're praying right now for those that stand in need of prayer. We're praying for Paige family. We pray for other families that have lost loved ones. We pray for the sick and the shut in right now. And Father, as we go through this meeting, let us be mindful that it's about citizens and not about us. Help us now, as only you can do and you will do. And we thank you for what you've done thus far. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. As always, before we start our meeting, there's a few housekeeping. And one is, special meeting, budget session. Okay. The board will be discussing the proposed minutes. Also, not a toll-free, the toll-free line has been set up. And today. Line number is 1917-900-1022. Access code is 32347. This is not a toll-free number. It may be subject to your long-distance charges, according to your long-distance plan. When the chairperson opens the meeting for public comments, please follow the below instructions. If you wish to speak, please dial 5. The moderator will unmute your line when it's your turn to speak and notify you by announcing the last 4 digits of your telephone number. Please announce your name and your address. You will be given 3 minutes to speak. With that being said, what do I hear?
It's a workshop.
Workshop, okay. All right, where do we start this morning?
We have a presentation from our tax collector, Mr. Mark Wiggins.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, board, how are y'all?
Don't know.
Don't know. So basically, the increase you'll see in your book is the $1 an hour raise that unfunded mandate, as Chairman pointed out. So that's basically all you see. So if you have any questions for me about our budget, I'll be more than happy to answer them for you.
How much is that increase?
That increase was.
I got it.
You got it right there?
I will. I might have it before you.
31, 2.
31,000?
Yeah, 31,038. This does not include the constitutional officers. Tell me that.
That's for a $1 increase.
Yeah,
I got 31 employees.
No, that's the dollar for the 12 employees that I have. The impact for the 12 employees that I would have.
That's the insurance and everything.
No,
Retirement and all that.
there is a little bit of
Just the
increase
$1.
for retirement. There's a little increase for retirement, as we know. Unfortunately, we don't get to set that. And they just continue to go up. Unfortunately. High.
Okay. Anyone got any questions for Mr. Mark Wiggins?
Thank y'all. Thank you very much.
Don't get far.
I'll go.
Okay. What's next on the agenda?
Would y'all like to go ahead and discuss, solid waste budget and address the deficit we have in that
Yeah.
proposed budget for
Let's
next
get
year?
us in.
Pass out some materials that I'm hoping will be helpful.
Yeah.
These are the, budgets that GSG has prepared for us. And also a 5-year capital needs. So as we were moving, as you know, we've been working with Neighbors Goodland and Nickerson and Government Services Group for 2 years now to complete the solid waste study. And if you recall, last year, the recommendation was to pause on changing any of the assessment amount until we could secure our sites. We went through that exercise. So now, unfortunately, since last year, there has been an increase in operational costs, and it's substantial. So rather than continuing to try to work off a budget from 2019 and 2021, what we did was, when we prepared our budget request for the board to consider, we gave those updated numbers to Government Services Group. So the numbers would be the same. I just think it's too confusing for us and for citizens to work off an old budget that has incremental increases in it. So what we did was we increased our fuel cost substantially. We looked at the tipping fees and did an average of over the last few years. We increased the tipping fees to $350,000. And we also prepared a 5-year capital improvement plan so we could adequately forecast what we felt like our capital needs would be. We increased repair and maintenance for vehicles because we've seen a substantial increase in that area. And then, of course, we put in the dollar an hour increases for next year and the mandated minimum wage increase for the following years. So I know it's a lot of information to take in. Then finally, what I asked GSG to do, so you really had some choices and, could really have some choices to make this hard decision, is I asked her to prepare 2 draft budgets for you to consider. One with the capital included in it. And so when you look at the capital line item, you'll see the 5-year CIP, and then there's an additional capital item for somewhere around $31,000. That's to pay off the roll-off truck that we purchased, I think, back in 2019. Just so the numbers make sense. So if you look at the 5-year capital needs, the total of that, and it's in one of your handouts, is $1,631,600. The 5-year average is $326,320.
Where's that at?
Right here, from this handout. And then I also attached an equipment list, so you would understand why we're asking for additional trucks, fencing, compactors, pickups, so you understand, where the age and the mileage of the trucks that we have in our fleet now. So if you take all that into consideration, when you look at the budget from the study, the top says residential solid waste with CIP. If you go to the second page, because I know this is what is on everyone's mind, the 5-year average for the assessment would be $210. That's with equalizing the assessment. That includes RVs, hunt camps, and really all dwellings. Mark, and here's where I need your help. So the number that we are looking at for total dwellings is 9,339. That's 95% of our billing units. But out of that, we have 2,799 RVs and hunt camps, correct?
Yes, to the best of our knowledge.
So that's a lot of RVs and hunt camps. That's one away from 2,800 RVs and hunt camps.
2,700 what?
99. And that's what y'all have captured.
Yeah, that's what we have captured.
Okay. So the additional revenue from leveling that is $261,230. And
$161,230. That's hunting camps and what? RV?
RVs, right. And unfortunately, we're projecting that we will need more than that. If you look at the budget that reads residential solid waste, no CIP, these are the numbers that the board needs to consider to assess if you use your 1-cent sales tax to fund the capital purchases. So basically, we just took the capital out of that Well, the capital's in there, but you'll see a transfer from Fund 151. The capital's in there, the numbers are the same, but it's funded with 1 cent sales tax. Your 5-year average for that budget is $173. So that would be an increase from 140, if you look at the 5-year average to 173. And that would be an increase of 4667 to 173
Without capital.
without capital.
So the total would be what now,
The 5-year average is 173. So there's a couple of items that I need you to consider.
What page is that on?
It's the one that says.
Last page.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of items for you to consider. In order to adopt the initial assessment resolution, which will be on the agenda August 1st, we need to have a number from y'all, which is the highest number that you feel like you will impose over the next 5. Well, it doesn't have to be over the next 5 years, but if you want to go any higher than that, we'll have to go through this exercise and send out notices and go through the entire exercise. So what I would recommend is that we come to a landing point of if you want to use 1 cent sales tax to fund capital, or if you want this fund to be self-sustaining. Because these notices will go out August 13th. Will be, so about 10,000 citizens will be noticed. Well, is that how many owners we have, Mark?
That's a good number. I think it's a good number, yeah.
So there'll be close to 10,000 notices going out that will notify folks that their solid waste assessment will be changing. And my anticipation is that, folks may get maybe unhappy because we have to use the highest number that we may wish to go to. So obviously, that's something that's going to require a commitment from y'all, because if you decide, what I would caution you about is to say, okay, well, we'll just look at it every year, and we may or may not wish to use a 1 cent sales tax. But if you do that, then you'll have to raise the assessment, would be my anticipation, and again, we'll have to go through this exercise again. So that's something that's going to require some discussion.
Why it's probably best to use the higher,
It is,
because you can always come down, you just can't go up
correct.
without a big to-do.
Correct. And what I would do if you don't wish to use the 1 cent, if you do wish to use the 1 cent sales tax to help support that fund, then the number that we would need to advertise would be 191. But that's not the final number we need to come to. Although Danielle, you need some type of,
I need a number to prepare the budget.
okay, so
You see what I'm saying?
if they approve the budget, then that's really what we need. You just need you need to know if they approve the budget that we presented.
$191 a year, is that what you say?
It's the highest, but
That's
that's the
if we don't
number,
use the 1 cent sales tax.
correct, and that's the number you would need to advertise.
Can you lay out the pros and the cons of using the 1 cent sales tax?
Well, the 1 cent sales tax, I guess you will have to come to a landing point of how you wish to utilize that fund. I know that originally when the ordinance was adopted, I believe that the thought was to use it for capital purchases and dredging. And then when the need came up,
Capital purchase
Mhm.
and dredging.
isn't that right, Mary? Originally, yes, that was the original intent,
Now, we got dredging, but,
correct. So
so that's no longer there.
correct.
Okay.
So then the ordinance was changed when we entered into contract with Century to utilize 1 cent sales tax for capital purchases and for EMS. So, and that fund brings in about 2 million,
I'm estimating it for next fiscal year at 2.2.
$2.2 million a year. Currently, you have 50% of it allocated out. 25% goes to the sheriff, and 25, well, this is the last year of DMH's 25%. And later on, we'll need to discuss that. So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off track. The pros and cons.
Okay.
I mean, the pros of it is that it's, you know, you can use it for operations only because our population is less than 50,000. So small counties do have the option of using it for operations. And so if you don't wish to raise the assessment to what probably feels like a substantial increase.
What is that? Substantial increase, what are we talking about? What did GS?
High-end number, $228 on this sheet.
All right, $228 versus $191, is that what we're talking?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So, LaWanda, if you used the 1 cent to supplement the solid waste, then how much would that leave then for our capital, for EMS?
Okay, well, you're already using your 1 cent sales tax to fund capital for solid waste. So I think the total for this budget year is around $300,000 because it's not average. So it's $326,000 a year. And how much is budgeted of the, about 1.1 million for 1 cent sales tax?
For who?
Just total.
For next year or for this year?
For next year.
For next year, right now you have, 408 going to EMS, 550,000 going to the sheriff. You have 1.2 going to, your fund for road and bridge, solid waste. And, then you have 2.1 in reserves. And then you have the carry forward for DMH is a little over 1.
So if I understand that right, if we were to go and setting the high rate at 191, which would keep the commitment for the 1 cent money, that wouldn't cause a real disruption for how the budget is currently moving forward.
No. So as far as cons, I think the biggest, you know, the con would be any negative impact to our citizens and, you know, burden placed on our citizens. Because their assessment could go from $140 to over $200. Now, when you break that out over a 12-month period, it doesn't seem like much, but I know it will feel like a burden to some of our citizens. Now, if you wish to use capital moving forward, the recommended assessment for next year would be 157, but that's actually, every day that goes by, I feel a little worried about if that's even going to be enough because of the way that the costs are skyrocketing. Solid waste uses a lot of diesel. Diesel has increased 157% since last year. I know repairs are up because of the labor rate has changed substantially. I know some of the parts have increased substantially. And we put in the budget $350,000 for tipping fees. The average over the last 4 years is, I think, 328. So the The 157 doesn't leave us a lot of wiggle room if inflation continues to impact our operations.
And that would be for 1 year.
Yes, and the good thing about this is you can change this by resolution every year. And that's really what we should do. And you can do that without noticing the public, because they've already been noticed of, by first-class mail of the highest possible amount. But that's something that you can consider every year. So, for example, if gas prices come down and we don't utilize everything that's in the budget and utility costs don't skyrocket and, repair and maintenance stays where we budgeted, then, the 157 may be fine, but I am a little anxious about cutting it too close because we have no reserves.
You know what you need, the projections. What you don't want to do is get into a situation where next July we've used all of our budget money.
Correct.
Now, if you get more than you need, then that's carry forward.
That goes into reserves.
And then you're building the reserves
Which we need to
again instead of depleting the reserves.
And I know the 5-year average is, I would feel more comfortable if, we considered, between the 157 and the 170, if you're willing to do that, just because we're at the point we have no reserves. We could be careful in our general fund because we know that if we don't have enough funds close to the end of the year, then we have contingency. But we don't have that in solid waste any longer. So we do need to consider if we want to budget enough so we can set some aside and to go into reserves. So the way this is structured, there's no consideration for reserves. These are strictly operational costs. I know that's a lot of information.
So the 191 you talked about, we're talking about 228.
Yes.
228 is enough, is a prediction for 5 years. At the max of 5 years, it would be 228 per year, right?
Yes. That's with a 4% increase just for inflation every year.
Okay. Now, the 191, tell me about that. Tell us about it.
191 would be with a 4% increase every year. 191 would be what they're projecting in 2026, 2027.
Okay. With no reserve. You won't expect a reserve. Okay.
So what I will need from y'all today, if possible, is the number that we need to send to Neighbors Giblin and Nickerson to use for the initial assessment resolution.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I'm continuously hearing from citizens, some in my district and some in not my district, that they're still concerned about all the sheds and all the campers. And some places, and I know in my district, and I've told you about some of them that have lots of campers on a small piece of land. And they're concerned about all these people not paying their fair share. And I don't think we have a handle on that yet. And I've always said, if you're living, I don't care if you're living in a shed or if you're living in the biggest house in Taylor County, you need to pay your share. And that's not being done. Do y'all get complaints? Are y'all still getting complaints about that?
I do. I get complaints about when I go around and talk to people, we talk about solid waste, and they find out that they're paying 140 all these years, and people right there in the corner of their yard, they're paying 1/3 of that.
Or nothing?
Or nothing, right. It makes them real mad. They didn't realize everybody wasn't paying the same, but the general public doesn't realize that not everybody's paying the same. And that's just over a period of time, nobody's ever brought that up to us. And when you tell them that they're paying 1/3, they get mad. You can't blame them, because they got a kitchen, and they got a wind ditch just like they do, you know?
Well, I hear a lot from folks that own a house in town and may own one on the coast. Just because they own they're paying the full amount, and when they hear that somebody owns a house in town, and then they may have a RV somewhere, that they're just paying a portion, it's like, why do I pay a full amount on, I got 2 pieces of property, they got 2, why don't they pay a full amount, just because they got an RV, and I got a house?
Well, yeah, I hear that argument too. If I have a house on the river or whatever, and I'm at the river, then obviously I'm not generating trash at home, or vice versa, you know. But I know for our family, we've always paid the full amount for everything, because I think that's what's expected, and that's how it is, and end of the story. You know, we're not trying to get a free ride or whatever. So and especially if you live in something and you're paying nothing or part of it, that's not fair. Now, if you're, you know, again, how do we get a handle on that? How do we get a handle on all these people that are paying nothing? They have extension cords or whatever. Who is responsible for doing that?
Well, I believe our tax collector has made a substantial effort to go out and do visits and to identify, how many did y'all pick up last year? I can't remember the number.
I can't tell you off the top of my head, I mean, I can give you that number, but, if you're asking who's the enforcement behind it, it's not the tax collector's office.
But who identifies it then?
It can be picked up by permitting, it can be picked up by the property appraiser's office, or it can be picked up by us. And we all work together. The problem that you have, or that I think you have, with these that are on these lots, is permits are not being pulled. That's a big issue.
The fire pole,
Yeah.
fire pole means something though, don't it? I mean,
Your power pole does, but like with the pole barns and stuff, if something's already there and they do the pole barns and stuff and
They just plug in.
they just plug in and go and, yeah, you don't need, yeah. Power pole, you're gonna need one, but I think we miss quite a few, but my field person is out every day.
Do you, I know used to, and I don't know what goes on now, okay? But used to, somebody ran around looking for expired tags on your car. And if they found one, because we were at the old hospital, I went out one day after work, I found a notice on my car.
Right, yeah, right.
And so, do you still do that?
Right.
Okay. So how can we, I mean, obviously, I think we're losing a lot of revenue from people that are living full-time in these places. I see a bunch of them in my district. So are you waiting on a tattletale? Or are we actually proactive in trying to find them? Or just what are we doing? Are we just sitting there talking about it again?
The tax collector's office is proactive because we're out there every day, and that's what we're looking for. When we're out, just say we're doing a tax deed where we're having to take pictures and stuff like that, we're out there doing that, but we're also out looking at new places that have come up. And we go, scallop season, we're strictly down in the beaches area. Other than that, we're up here hunting. When it's hunting season, we're in the hunting camps. Other than that, we're all throughout town trying to find these things. We see an ad on the side of the road, a sign that says RV hookups for rent. They need a business license, you know, tourism, development money, stuff like that. We're sending them letters. There's no teeth in the ordinance.
And I don't want to get too off topic, but I
Yeah,
know
that's-
you can help with this. And we're going to talk about it next week. But this issue with density, with RV density, that's I would say a driving force with the problem we're having in solid waste. Because I feel like inadvertently, it's unchecked, because pretty much every residential parcel can have 4 RVs. And and you recorded 2,800 of them, but I don't know how many there are. How could you in rural
Yeah,
areas?
there's more. I'm going to tell you.
That's probably what Mr. Eagle maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, which may be asking, whenever y'all are out and about, and these field guys are out and about, and you see negligence, so to speak, that several RVs probably hooked into power cords. What do y'all do to address it? What's next, I guess?
All right, so I have one field person, just so you know. He covers this whole county. We take a picture, we add it to the tax roll, the special assessment tax roll.
Is there any lag time and when that's actually assessed? So if you see that today, when does that show up on the budget? Or when does that show up in the revenues, I should say?
It shows up that next year.
Cycle.
Yeah,
So
the next
that
cycle.
means if you find that early in that year, you're gonna carry most of that time.
I find in January, or even December, or November, October, I mean, it's the next budget year before you're gonna see it.
Can that be changed?
Well, no, because that's what because you're paying your taxes on the previous year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just don't receive the revenue until the next year, but it's for the previous year.
So that,
Yeah, okay,
There's
okay.
whatever that time frame is, that you're not getting any revenue for the service you're providing.
But you have to identify it first, so.
Yes, ma'am.
Unfortunately, I think that we've inadvertently created, an opportunity for a lot of folks to be here, and we want them here, of course. But, this creates a demand for services where we don't have the revenue. Now, y'all are addressing that with solid waste, but I would say this can impact every department, and every constitutional officer. Just the sheer volume of RVs that we have here. I recognize that it's very good for businesses, and I'm not saying we need to take that away from them, but it might be time to, unfortunately, we're addressing it, but it takes a while to address these issues, and now, we're going to have to address the revenue situation with solid waste or reduce services.
One question. I believe you said there were no teeth in the ordinance.
Right.
Would that help if there were?
If you can find somebody to enforce it.
The question is, would that help if the ordinance were updated and you discovered there was a discrepancy?
I think any enforcement would help, yes.
That's something that we need to look at. And, like the sheriff says, if you see something, say something. All these people that are telling me, then, I'm telling them, but then, like the sheriff said, if you see something, say something. Call whoever, call the tax collector or the property appraiser or whoever. Because, and another thing, some of these places have no sewer hookup, and believe me,
And we report that to the whole.
that is a problem in some areas. But I do want to say this, I'm going back to the hunting camps, and I made a promise, and I have to stick by it. A promise made is a promise kept. And these people that use their hunting camps for 2 or 3 months out of the year, I can't see charging them the whole amount.
How's that any different from somebody that uses a beach house?
I have a beach house and I pay the whole $140. I have rental properties and I pay it,
Sure.
but I make income too sometimes.
But you pay most of the assessment.
But a hunting camp, you know, I don't think these people use them that often.
I think there's some that reside there year round, and I think you got that potential just as much as you would with a river house or a beach house.
You're not, folks aren't renting these beach houses out either.
I mean, I just see where folks are paying that assessment that flies, and I'm not trying to penalize anybody. But I look at this fund and I see a continual, shortfall. So, but as I understand these numbers, and I think that's the question for now, I think the most, efficient way and to not cause an undue burden is to look at this 191 that keeps this use of the 1 cent money the way that it currently is, so that we don't, you know, we make this effort to try to make up for the shortfall, but not to the, worst extent, let's say, in pain factor.
Let me tell you what I was told. If you call and report, your name got to go down or they won't go and inspect. Is that right?
That's code enforcement. That's not for the purposes of this. So if someone reports an RV, that's something that the tax collector's office would take care of. That's a separate issue.
I don't need a name. I mean, if you see something like Mr. Fiegel said, call me. And we can tell you if we've already been there. And we can tell you if we've already added it to the roll. Or we haven't, and we go out there and we take pictures. Because the reason we take the pictures, is because the person called, oh, it wasn't there. Well, here's the date and time, and we took the picture and it was there, so you pay.
I have a problem with my assessment going up when you still have these people that are paying nothing. And I don't feel good about that for myself, and I don't feel good about that for other people. You talk about the deficit and getting a handle on it. You know, I just wonder how many people are paying nothing, and I've got to pay for we have to pay for their, getting by with paying nothing. There's something wrong with that.
I just wanted to add one thing. I do think that Mark knows better, but I believe whenever you sent out the new stickers this year, didn't you have identify a lot of people that needed?
Yeah, we actually, that was one of the positives that came out of it.
Right. So there was a lot of people that went to the dump site and they didn't have their sticker, so they had to go get one, and then come to find out they weren't even being charged.
If they weren't being charged, they got popped on there.
Mark was able to add them to the.
So that was a positive thing that came out of that, for sure.
Well, I think for sure we need to put some teeth in our ordinance. That would help. That's something we need to put on the agenda right away in London to try to take care of that. And when we see these things that can help us, we need to move on it.
Well, you said there was an issue with enforcement.
Yes. I mean, in the ordinance,
You
there's,
don't have personnel to enforce it, or there's not?
no, I definitely don't have the personnel to enforce it. But as far as in the ordinance itself, there's, like I said before, there's no penalty. I can send a letter or something like that. And that goes for a couple of things throughout the county that we deal with, business who doesn't have a business license, we can send them a letter, but that's all we can do. I can't go to them and say, you're gonna pay this, or there's a fine of this, this, and this, or we're gonna take you to jail for this, this, and this. We don't have that in that ordinance either.
On the revenue can come in and shut them down, right?
Department of Revenue,
You don't pay sales tax.
yeah, Department of Revenue, I don't know what Department of Revenue would do.
It would have to go on for a long time and get really ugly before they done anything.
What?
I mean, you could, that'd be a whole nother.
The only way that really enforce it would be cut the power off. I mean, that would get their attention.
And under what legal
That's what I'm saying, we need to put teeth in it, I mean, but we need some way of doing that. I mean, I don't know if that cutting fire off is the right avenue, but we need teeth in it where we can enforce it. That's the only thing gonna stop them from living there. So,
I would think the only thing you could probably do is maybe find, it's probably gonna be your.
Even if you got a RV park, and there's one person, one permanent camper there, when he rents that space out, is that space charged? Is there any way to track that space that he rents out?
Most of your RV parks have a contract with Waste Pro, so they're not charged a fee at all, because they have a contract with Waste Pro.
The difference is that's not considered residential. That's considered commercial.
Well, most cases, yes. Now, there are cases where you have families that have a Waste Pro.
Correct.
And
But in most of those cases, if it's an RV park,
yeah,
that would really vary from being residential to a commercial type setting, which would really require that they provide for their solid waste.
Sure.
And so we legislate that we don't get no revenue from it as far as solid waste goes.
Why do we legislate?
RV parks, they come to us and ask us to let them have a permit. But once we let them have a permit, then they go and get somebody to collect their own garbage and don't even look back at us.
But we don't have a cost for disposing of that either. So they're taking on the burden, they're taking on the risk of the park, and they provide that service for their customers.
They're still paying this,
No, they just pay the fee with whatever company they use to dispose of that. I believe it's Waste Pro, that county Waste Pro. But they're not causing, and they're not included in this number of RV assessments. So they're not necessarily the individuals or the issue at hand. Because if they're providing a dumpster, then they're providing the service. They're not putting that burden on the county.
and that's commercial.
Correct.
Just remember that's commercial. not-
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but I'm just saying, this is something that goes on in this county. And we're talking about getting money from every source we can. And that's, if you got, how many, RV parks we got?
Do you remember off the top of your head? I don't know off the top of my
20?
head.
there's probably 40 in the county.
What?
Don't you think? Every bit of 40.
every bit of it.
Yeah, that could be 20, campus feet park, right?
And if they got that car that they can give them people to carry that stuff to the dump, they gonna do that too. I mean, that's why I wanted sticker only when we did that. I didn't want that car to be passed around to the people that carry garbage to the dump, that they had it up the sticker on the window. That didn't work that way. But believe me, they pass the cards to people to go to the dump.
They are. But what I've seen is people that have a little extra, property around where they live, and they're letting a lot of people pull in campers that live there and live there. They're not pulling them to stay for 2 or 3 days and fish or hunt or whatever. They are actually residing there, and they're pulling power cords. I've seen extension cords. I know one place, there's probably 6 or 7 of them on there.
They dig a hole with a shovel, put a 55-gallon drum in it.
They do.
Knock 4 or 5 holes in the bottom of it, and that's their fifth time. I've seen it my whole life.
The places you're talking about, have they been reported?
Say
The
again?
places you're talking about, have they been reported? I guess to these guys, or
I'm sorry, I cannot.
have the places you're talking about, have they been reported to these guys, or?
Some of the neighbors that called me about it, I told them, I said, you need to report it, and I also said something about it too.
The health department.
Well, I'm just talking in the number of RVs in general that we're talking about on these pieces, is if that's an issue and someone's not paying their share, then there's the right people to report it to, be the tax collector.
The health department can get after them about 6 times.
For sure, but that would all get addressed at the same time, I mean, that.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, that was.
You know, you just call us, I mean, we'll get there. We will get there. If we hadn't already been there.
So what I need from the board is, really is approval of the budget request. And I need to know the number that you wish to use to advertise for the initial assessment resolution.
And if I can just say something too, I think, so, I mean, right now, we're, 328 is the real number. 228 is the real number. We've got the budget here for 5 years, 228 is the real number. If you choose to use the 1 cent and then go with the 191, that's fine, and what we would do is set aside the 1 cent for 5 years, that amount of money that's in here. So we would, we'd go ahead and earmark that, for the next 5 years of the 1 cent to help cover this, because we got a 5-year plan here. So that's the way we would do it in the budget, is we would go ahead and just earmark that money every year and dedicate that money out for the next 5 years, out of the 1 cent sales tax to cover
The 1.6 million for the capital.
yeah, it's 1.6 million for this. If you choose to go that route and not do the 228.
That's the 191 you talking about.
Right.
I'd rather hold that 1 cent tax for reserve myself. I mean, I hate to get completely stretched out, we don't have enough money in reserve myself.
We're coming into the next, probably 2 budget years, it's gonna be needed. It'll be rough.
If inflation keeps going the way it's going, we'd be in a mess.
So if we use the 228, that would run for the next following year, but you could change it if needed. I mean, that would run for our next calendar year.
Well, all you need to do today is determine what you wish to advertise, and which would drive whether or not you want to use the 1 cent sales tax.
That's just not, so if we drive, hey, we decide we wanna go with 228, not use the 1 cent sales tax, that's not saying that the number will be 228 for the next year.
It's just advertising.
That's advertising the highest, that's advertising the highest number.
Highest number.
And the actual number could end up being 185. I think.
It reduce.
Right.
My understanding is wherever, if you set the highest rate, you can always reduce that. And increase it.
I think that's what we should do. And
Have enough discussion on that?
now,
Go ahead.
if we chose to go with the 228 and not use the 1 cent sales tax, how hard would it be? What would it take if we needed to use the 1 cent sales tax at some point? What would the, if we had to go back, if for some reason we needed to use some of the 1 cent sales tax for solid waste?
If whatever number you adopt isn't high enough,
Correct. If we
Right.
went into a situation.
Where you just need it for just a purchase company.
yeah,
You can, because it's the capital, you can use it for anything for capital.
the reason we prepared the 5-year CIP was to give you an idea of what the projected needs are. I would like concurrence, before we factor those numbers in. But I wouldn't say it's written in stone, because next year it may be different. I don't anticipate that it will be
When will we set the actual assessment?
in September.
September? I would go with advertising the higher amount without using the 1 cent sales tax, I do believe.
Okay. Is that a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Well, no, you can't, it's a workshop.
Fiscal
It's a workshop.
No, you don't need a motion.
No, sir. I just need guidance, so I can provide that to Neighbors Giblin and Nickerson,
Yeah.
so they can start working on the notices. And, and then that will be actually approved by the board on August 1st.
Okay.
And then the notices will be mailed in mid-August.
Okay.
I want to say one thing. What I've heard, Gary talk, and me and Mr. Wanda researched it a little bit, we're actually the cheapest in North Florida as far as garbage goes now. And if you over $200, you're not even looking for what some counties charge. And the city of Perry charges over $200. So, I mean, we.
$20 a month.
It's been a long time coming, we need to get up there where we can take care of our bills, you know.
I think another key part of that is with this inflation and the cost of diesel,
Right.
that's gonna have a bigger impact on what we're trying to accomplish today as far as balancing this fund. But I think you've got to take into account, if you have a long-term effect of what this inflation, these diesel costs are gonna be, it's gonna be an impact in this fund and across the whole budget. Because, I mean, if you look currently, I don't believe anybody anywhere has built $6 diesel prices in any of their operational expenses. Now, I do think some of this tries to look into that for what we're talking today. But when we talk about those other counties and where their costs are, I don't know for sure, but I don't believe they're built on the diesel prices that are current.
Okay.
So you may see that their costs
Going up.
incrementally
Go up.
rise even higher.
Right.
So, I mean, I hope they don't, but I don't see a lot of actions in other places that are addressing this crisis that we have with energy.
And we did, we talked to Jefferson County. Jefferson's current solid waste assessment is at $225, and they only accept household garbage. Madison County is at $220, it looks like. They do accept a small amount of construction debris. They call it dry bulky material, and they allow customers to rent containers. Jefferson County, they charge separately to rent containers. So, I mean, the $228 would be in the ballpark of some of our surrounding counties, if you choose to adopt that particular rate. So 140 is very low compared to surrounding counties.
And we'd be taking a lot more than the other counties take. We take everything right now, but we gotta get a handle on that. C and D too. We can't forget that. There's a many contractor all up stuff to the side, you know.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing too, that if you can't get a control over the expenses and reduce the expenses or come up with some additional revenue by charging, then you can keep that from going to 228 or,
Right.
you know what I mean? You can control that number because you're adding additional revenue and you also, you know, you're probably controlling some of the expenses by not taking certain things. And, so that can always, if you make changes like that, that can always help. Not everything you have to get to the 228.
And what I'll do is, I'm going to go through these numbers one more time, line by line, and make sure everything lines up, but, and make sure that, I don't think it will change the 228, but I'll do that one more time before I communicate with the attorney for Neighbors, Giblin and Nickerson, and then we'll move forward with that.
As of right now, I can't support this kind of increase because we've got too many things to me that have not been fixed. Number one is that C and D, and we don't know yet today, after all these years of discussion, of just what we are looking at with C and D. We don't know. And we've sat here and said, oh, C and D is the problem, which I thought it was. And then come to find out, well, maybe that's not our problem, but we don't know if it's our problem or not. So that's an issue for me. And an issue for me that we've got so many people that are paying nothing. And I hate to put the burden of this. The easy way out is to say, let's go up on the process. And we'll talk about C and D later, and we'll talk about all the people that pay nothing later. And then this time next year, Commissioner Moody, we'll be talking about C and D, and we'll be talking about all the people that don't pay anything. And then the year after that, the way it's been going, we'll be talking about it again.
We've been talking about it 3 or 4 years.
A long time. And
We've
so,
got to get a handle on it.
so I can't support such as this until we've exhausted everything that we can do so that everybody's paying their fair share. And whether it's C and D and you have to charge extra, or you change your roll-off so that there's no place to put it, or I don't know what the solution is, but this is a substantial increase for people to make up for people that are slacking. That's just my opinion, that's all.
Anybody else got anything?
I'm ready to move on.
Okay. What number we gonna use? 128, 228?
28 is what will be advertised.
Okay. Luana, you got the information you need to?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, guys.
If we could have a workshop to look into the ordinance adjustment, if you know of suggestions for penalties.
We did some research and
Which ordinance are you referring to?
just well,
The business?
there's a couple, there's a business
Business
tax.
tax?
Yeah,
Imagine what Mr. Knowles had mentioned is our only avenue would be to find folks that's showing negligence to the system.
Okay.
Mark, could you talk to other counties, in your position and see what they do and see what kind of, it might be, get some research from them and find
yeah,
out
I think
how they
that's
handle that.
Yeah, that's the way I'll go with it. There's a lot of counties that don't have the business tax side, but, everybody's got a landfill side around us, so we need to figure out what they're doing.
Put some teeth in our ordinance so that, and have somebody that can enforce it.
If it even takes a special person just to enforce it, it wouldn't be the end of the world if we get it straightened out, you know.
Right, yeah, and I think that enforcement person could probably do multiple enforcement things also.
You'd be a Superman.
You could be Superman or Superwoman, absolutely. Absolutely.
Big, strong,
Just so everybody knows, because I have to balance solid waste, I have to do a balanced budget. So if it's, the 228 is gonna be what's advertised, because I have to put a tentative budget online per statute before our first public hearing. And so you won't vote on what the assessment rate is until September 6th. And I have to put it online before then. So I'll balance the budget with the rate that's going to be advertised, even though that's not the rate that you're gonna adopt. I just want you to understand that. So, because I have to show it as being balanced, if that makes sense. And what'll happen after you actually vote on the 6th, on the rate, that very next day, I will adjust the budget pending what the assessment rate is. Does that make sense? Because the statute changed last year, and used to, we didn't have to put the tentative approved budget online before the public hearings, but now we do. And it has to be online for 45 days. And so even though that's not going to be what is actually approved at the public hearing, I still have to put it on there. So I have to put something on there.
And that budget amount would be 2.194865. Okay.
It'll just show in the reserves, is basically what it will show in. That additional money that comes in will be an increase in the reserve, and then I'll just take it out, is how it will show. In case anybody asks you.
After the public hearing.
After the public hearing, if they see it online, that's why.
Just one question, just for my office to know. we're taking away the third. Is that what
That was adopted by ordinance
this week was already done? Okay.
but that won't be in effect until next fiscal year because the board will have to adopt the resolution. So the ordinance will be effective immediately, but there won't be any changes in the budget for this fiscal year,
For 22, 23,
for the current fiscal year.
the current this week.
So what I'm saying is that, so nothing would change as far as assessments for this year.
Right,
Even though the
For
ordinance was
2022 taxes,
Yes.
nothing's gonna change, but 2023 taxes,
Yes.
we will not have the third.
And if I can say one other thing, I just want to thank Lawanda and Danielle and all them that did this work. To me, this 5-year budget is way off. We should have a 5-year plan just like this one for all of our areas and all of our departments. Because this is good planning here.
I know how to do it now.
From a person that come in through finance, this kind of stuff right here, I'm like, this is good stuff here. This is what the real numbers are. This is a 5-year plan, and that's something you can work with right there.
And that's, I mean, now that, we have an idea of the multiplier and, I mean, we could apply that same formula to all of our budgets and really have an idea instead of, and I know, Gary, you've been saying this for a while, it's like every year where we react because, and this year was an exception. And I'll say that as far as the solid waste budget, it was a little bit of a struggle because of the inflationary effects. This, in a way, is the best and worst time to look at this because this is the worst case scenario when we're asking for a commitment from y'all. But if we had gone through this exercise last year, I think we'd be in the same place. We would not have been able to anticipate the increased cost, and we would not, and we'd still be saying we don't have enough revenue to get through the year. So even though it's been an exercise, I'm glad. It's probably better that it happened this way.
Okay, so we taking care of solid waste, right? What's the next one?
Want to talk about road and bridge?
You guys asked me Monday to explain how I come up with road and bridge and secondary. Do you want me to still do that?
You got what now?
On road and bridge and secondary, Monday you had asked how I come up with the revenue and how the distributions are. Do you want me to still do that?
Yeah.
So road and bridge is on page 338 in your binder and secondary is 362. Hold on.
Very good.
Yes, sir. And then secondary is 362 and 363.
Okay. Got it?
So, 338 is the overall for road and bridge, and it has the revenue and the expenditures. The expenditures, include the dollar and the minimum wage mandate. The one thing for the road department, for the past 2 years, and Luana could probably go into more detail also, but they have budgeted for 29 positions, when in fact it should have been 27. So for next fiscal year, they fixed that, and so the actual increase, even though they put in the dollar an hour, was only $2,000 for personal services. So, their operations did go up, and then the other thing for road and bridge is the engineer department. And so when you look at that with the revenue coming in, which are the fuel taxes, the shortfall for road and bridge for the revenue versus the expenditures is $1 million. When there is a shortfall in the road and bridge, we transfer from secondary road paving to road and bridge to cover the shortfall. And this is the estimated transfer to balance. Now, sir?
300,000.
No, the estimated transfer to balance is $1 million. That is gonna come out of secondary. When I do the transfer at the end of the fiscal year. After we do all payables in November for the fiscal year, we've received all the revenue. I recalculate all the revenue versus the expenditures. The transfer may not be that much, but I estimate based on what the budget is submitted and based on the estimated revenue. And so that is, the carry forward is reduced. The carry forward is only estimated to be 300,000 going into next year for road and bridge, which is reducing the reserves. So if you go to 362 and 363 in your secondary, that shows how I come up with the distribution. So there's only one fuel tax that funds secondary, and that's the 80% constitutional fuel tax. And that's on page 363. And so if you take that revenue, and a few years ago, it was approved to transfer $32,500 for an inmate work squad into the general fund. And then I reduce out whatever the transfer is to fund road and bridge. And then it gives me a balance. Of course, for this, it's a negative balance. Normally, it's not a negative balance. So if it was not a negative balance, I would take that balance and I would half it. One half goes into the common account, and then the other half I would split between your 5 districts, and that would be your new funding for the year. But since it is a negative amount, that means there's no funding for the districts for next year, and that negative amount is going to be reduced from the common account so that it'll balance. The common account is carry forward from is estimated amount of carry forward from this year. Did I explain that?
Yeah.
Okay.
To me, it does.
Okay.
Tell me something, what will happen, how could you use this 1.046072? Will that ever be reduced?
The 1046072 is the amounts from your districts.
I know, but how, can it be used for anything?
Your district funds? Yes, so that can be used, typically we use it for road paving projects.
So, here we go again.
Yes.
Oh, goodness, I talked to you yesterday about options, and there are some options, although I'm not for the options, but there are options available to us. And right now, since I've been here, we've depended on scrap and scop mostly. And, but we could, and I'm not for it, but we could raise our gas tax. You have a maximum of 12 cents. Right. We're at 6 cents now.
Right.
So that could go up, but when I think about that, and I think about the price of gas now, and people are struggling, and people are telling me, well, I'm not, it's hard for me to go to my doctor's appointment out of town or something because of the gas. And so a lot of people that I've talked to have really cut back on their operating their vehicle because of the gas prices. So for me personally, I don't see that as an option, but it would bring in more revenue.
Well, there's two local options that y'all could consider, and one is the 1 through 5 local option, which can be used for infrastructure, and then the 9th cent, which would, so you have 6 cents available. You have your 1 through 5 for infrastructure, and then your 9th cent, which would be your 6th cent, could be used for operations. So there are ways to replenish the funding, you know, that is being lost by secondary road paving fund transfer.
Yeah, but for me, I mean, that's not an option for me. And then I know some other counties have, used, bonds. But the problem with that is, they're not, you have to pay that back.
You have to have a revenue
You
source.
have to have a revenue source, so where's that revenue source gonna come from? So, you know, people say, well, y'all need to look at different options other than relying on state funding. Well, those are the options that I see, and we've chosen, since I've been here, not to implement going to the highest gas tax and not bonding because we have to pay it back. So I think we should be using what's offered us by the state. I wish it was more. And, you know, maybe it's a decision that the citizens could look at. Do you want to pay 12 cents instead of 6? To get more road, work done? I don't know.
That would basically double your fuel tax.
That's exactly right, and I'm not for that.
No.
And I don't think most people, I mean, I know people that live on dirt roads, and we all have that. And crumbling up roads. I've got roads crumbling in my district that really need to be resurfaced, as well as I know all of y'all do too. But, you know, we just don't have it here. And to get it, we would have to, as I just described, we would have to double the fuel taxes. We could go to bonding, but we gotta have that revenue source too. So I don't know what a valid answer is. You know, we're giving up our portion.
I think given the volatility of situation, this is the most safest path.
I think it is too.
I mean, otherwise, we're gonna go in debt, which I don't support.
I don't either.
Or we're gonna double the fuel tax, which I don't, at the worst time,
Yeah.
with gas already through the roof.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think this effort, and I'm commending staff, I'm not glad about how it's all just having to take place, but I think the conditions could be much worse. But this path, at least, is trying to take some of that steam out of the situation.
And it does, and the reason, Commissioner, that I even said what I said is because the public, a lot of times, don't understand what goes on up here with the 5 of us. They don't understand how we rationalize this or how we work through this. They think, whoa, there's other options out there. There's things we can do.
There were certainly
There's
worse
options out there.
Worse.
But it's not an option that we've chosen to take because we think it's a worst case scenario. So this is just for public information. I think this board has taken the right direction. You know, we rely on state funding, and believe me, if we didn't have that, we'd have a lot of dirt roads.
And Kenneth does an exemplary job getting funding for us from DOT and working with DOT. He really does.
Yeah.
He does an exemplary job with that.
He does.
Now, the one thing I do want to make sure everyone understands is that Danielle was correct. Last year, or this current fiscal year, we budgeted for 29 positions. We inadvertently budgeted for 27 for next year because there was just some confusion about how many positions we really should be budgeting for. So we budgeted for 27 and did not increase that when we realized that would put us basically 2 RMT short. But that is basically choosing not to fill 2 additional positions. So, I just want to make sure.
Road and bridge crew.
Yes.
How's that work for you?
I'm not thrilled, only because those positions sometimes can have a higher turnover rate because folks come in and you know, may not stay long-term because they may find other opportunities, say with the state. And that's a harder position to maintain. But is that the difference with adding the 2 positions back in? Or was it closer to 77,000?
It's 77,524 if you add the two positions back in, that's how much it would cost.
Is that?
So it would reduce your common account
In comparison
to that much.
to the loss of your employees, is that a similar experience that, you know, the sheriff's saying he gets folks trained up, then they find better opportunities, so you have a loss?
Sure.
So it's a parallel between sheriff's office and how they have good folks, but the struggles with compensation and retirement packages or plans, let's say benefits. They're more rich with other organizations, so those folks might be there for a while, then you're back with another vacancy.
Well, but I think, what happens, and this is the same issue we're having, and I don't want to talk about solid waste a whole lot more, but one of the reasons we've had to increase the budget is because we're relying on full-time employees to work our roll-off sites, because we cannot keep those positions filled. So that has greatly increased our overtime budget. We're already at $16,000 for the year. And we budgeted for way less than that because we didn't anticipate not being able to fill those positions. So I think that, with the minimum wage mandate and the way businesses and other organizations have reacted to that, our hourly rates are lower than a lot of other areas, a lot of other employers, and those people that are working those positions, they need the money. They may not have the same appreciation for our rich benefit package. So, and I think that's what it is. So if they could make, you know, a couple of dollars more an hour, by going to the state or going, you know, to the mill or someplace like that, then, you know, it's hard to keep some of these positions filled. It really has to be filled by someone who sees the value in our benefit package.
Yeah, and maybe we should be at a place where if somebody would rather have a higher hourly wage and forfeit the benefits, I don't see what would be wrong with that. And maybe we could retain these people a little bit longer. Of course, I do realize a lot of people take jobs for the benefits, but you do have some that don't necessarily value, like you said, value that as much.
And one of the items I would like some, and I don't want to go too far off topic, but just while we're talking about that, I would like the board to authorize, when we talk about the $1 an hour increase, I would like to apply that to our starting salaries as well. And so we can hopefully recruit people in at a little bit higher rate. Historically, we have given only current employees that $1 an hour. We haven't really applied it to our matrix that we use. But, you know, if we could go ahead and start people off $1 an hour higher, now that does cause some angst from employees who maybe have had to, you know, maybe they've been with us a year, but, and they're starting off at the same, or maybe they got a salary increase. But, you know, we're talking about two different issues. We're talking about retention and we're talking about recruitment. So the minimum wage this year goes up to $11 an hour. We're still trying to compete with people who are starting at 15, 16, 17 for entry-level positions. So that causes a bit of a problem as well.
Well, you know, we talked about this before, and 3 years ago, say for instance, if we'd have done something then, versus now, after say we hired somebody 3 years ago, now they've got 3 years under their belt. The people we're talking about now that maybe we've just hired, next year, then they'll have a year under their belt. So the more years that go by, the worse our employees are going to feel about increasing that starting salary the more years they've been on the job. You see what I'm trying to say?
Because it may have taken them years to get to that point.
So, you know, either you don't do it or you have to make that decision at some point in time. But, you know, we do, and this board, since I've been here, we've always tried to give the employees everything we could. We tried to keep their insurance, rates reasonable, and you know, we struggle through that every year. And when we absolutely could not give a raise, then we've tried to give a very nice Christmas bonus. Now, I know that does not go towards your retirement, but it's a gesture on our part that we appreciate and value our employees.
Does any of the efforts as far as the increases that are budgeted, would that take away any of the potential compression if you did have a start rate that was higher? Would that offset any of that? Or would it, is it still just a perception?
It would not, it would aggravate the issue of compression. Because if you.
Even with the efforts that are budgeted?
Yes. Don't you agree, Gary? I mean, if you raise your starting salary, then you're just further aggravating compression. But, you know, also, we have to have people to work.
When you say raise the starting salary, that's just not for regional, that's for all county employees.
Yes, that would be for all positions.
But, I mean, you really don't have much choice because you're not gonna find anybody if you don't. I mean, I've just looked at my office.
It's less.
It's not easy.
Everybody would, so basically, everybody would get the dollar.
Yeah.
Yeah, including people who haven't been, including open positions.
Yeah.
And that would be less compression than, as long as everybody got it.
Right.
Then if just the starting salaries got it and nobody else got it, that would, sound
But that's how the budget's still currently.
Yeah.
That dollar's there.
For everybody, including open positions.
Right.
It is in there.
So
for
that is
open
somewhat
positions.
offset the compression rate, the factor. Because, I mean, at some point, you've got to look at and say, look, how many weeks have we had vacancies that consistently get advertised and not filled? And there's a reason for it, it's not rocket engineering.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not trying to do a thing against our current employees or try to unnecessarily reflect that I don't appreciate the job they do. But when you have openings for months on end,
Or you have a revolving, what feels like a revolving door. I think the most difficult department to fill positions right now is solid waste, which is why we're so dependent on our full-time staff to, especially on the weekends, to work at those roll-off sites. Because we hire a few people and then we lose a few people. It's just constant trying, it feels like every time they make up a schedule, it's worrisome.
one step over to that.
So you mentioned the 16,000 in overtime. So still, if you compare that to what it would cost to have another full-time employee, that's still
It is.
a cost savings.
It is.
Plus, it does help those people, but I know from experience myself, you can work all these hours and at some point in time, the money is not worth sacrificing your health and welfare and everything else. So everybody needs time off. Because you will reach burnout. She knows I'm talking to her.
You stay mute.
We just gotta get through the next week and then we'll be
I've heard
okay.
that so many times.
I think the problem with compression is whenever you give when you raise the minimum salary $1 also, just like for instance in my office, hire someone last year at $13 an hour, October 1st, they're gonna be moved to $14 an hour, but then I'm gonna hire somebody at $14 an hour. They've already been here a year,
Right.
and the new person that's being hired is gonna be making the same amount of money. So the compression you don't compress the top part of it, but you do compress the bottom part of it.
Right. Right.
Law ain't
But
fair
you're not gonna hire
sometimes.
them, you're not gonna get anybody if you don't move it up, so you don't really have much choice, I don't think.
We're gonna have to do something, because we're short on help.
Yeah, I know one time I was told when I complained about my salary that people that worked under me made more money than me, and I was told, quick, Pam, sometimes life ain't fair. And so I never said that again, just, so, sometimes life ain't fair.
So back to page 363, I just wanted to, Danielle, correct me if I'm wrong, I just wanted to see this. So at the top, you got a negative 6937. Normally, in a normal year, in the past, that's been a plus.
Yes.
And then that plus was divided between the 5 districts at the middle of the page and the common account. It's now 989. So
Correct.
since it's a negative this year, that means there's not enough revenue coming in to cover the expenses. And so now that 60,000 was taken out of the reserves there,
It was taken out of the,
the
common account.
countywide common account. So, just so you know, it's fine, we'll be okay this year, but next year, we're gonna be negative 6937 starting out, if we're not gonna have revenue for it. Unless expenses go down or, we get more gas taxes.
What's your
Probably ain't gonna happen.
suggestion there? I mean, I realize that, but
Well-
what is the answer,
Well, I mean, and that's the problem, with all of our budgets
That's
here,
right.
is that you're having to fund things, and now you're having to fund a $15 an hour raise, but your revenues are limited. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
Walmart's revenues aren't limited. They are, but they can go up on the price of their goods, Car dealership can go on the price of their goods. People can charge, the gas station can charge more for gas and more for food. But you only have a certain amount that you can charge.
That's right.
So it's a real problem.
Now, Harry, if they levied the 9-cent fuel tax, which is just 1 penny, that would generate about $70,000 in
Split it, doesn't
The you're talking about that 9-cent motor fuel is an estimate of 117,000.
but then we split it to the city.
Not the 9-cent.
Okay.
Well, let's see where we are next year. I mean, we've got this year figured out, and fuel prices may come down next year. They may go up, I don't know, but
Well, that's
next year,
another-
we may have to
That's another
put that
department.
9 cent in, which is
Yeah.
1 cent.
Right, that's another department that uses a lot of fuel. And they have a lot of auto repairs. So, if fuel prices would ease off, come back down to where they should be, that would give us some breathing room. But
Because you base this budget off of these fuel prices next year continuing and they may, which is you had to do what you had to do. You had to figure that into the equation. But if it does come down, then
And this is another department or another budget where we use most of sales tax money for capital. So this is another department that is not cannot sustain itself with the revenue that we receive. And I don't know if we can use on the local option, the 1 through 5, if that, we can use that for equipment, capital purchases, or if that's only for infrastructure as far as road building.
Yeah,
Do you know?
well, when I'm trying to remember what I read of it, I know it says, infrastructure, and it said improvements to current, I think it was worded improvements to current roads.
Transportation
Or
problems.
unpaved roads, or current transportation related,
Problem.
yeah, something like that. So I don't,
But then she turned around and said, the lady I talked to at DOR yesterday, turned around and said, but is up to interpretation by your county attorney.
But it does say you cannot use it for operations. That is the last thing it says, is you cannot use it for operations.
Right, I read that. I just didn't know how to interpret the infrastructure part.
Yeah, I don't.
If that was, if we could use that
We'll
for,
probably have to get a legal opinion on that.
I would not personally want to use the 1 through 5 for capital purchases.
I understand. I was just trying to make a comparison between this fund and solid waste, that we are dependent on the 1 cent sales tax.
Absolutely.
And it's very much appreciated because we've been able to, we purchased the lightning loader, the excavator, new vehicles. I mean, it's made a large difference in how we operate.
You know, hard decisions are probably gonna have to be made, because here's my worry, is with, the property values. Okay, we're looking really good now that we have this increase the last couple of years because the values have gone sky high. But as we're seeing now with mortgage rates changing, and this is, I'm telling you, this is gonna, that bell curve is gonna come down on the other side, and it probably won't be, too long. So then when that happens, all the other values go down, we're gonna find ourselves in a world of trouble. We're depleting our reserves. We have no means of replacing our reserves. We're dependent on reserves, and I don't know, it's just like, you know, this is no different from what we do at home. You know, you put those reserves there, you try not to touch those reserves, because you never know what's gonna happen. We don't know what's gonna happen here. And if we don't have that savings account or those reserves, and we get caught in a crisis, what in the world are we gonna do? I go back and I hear Annie Mae, you know, every time we go through this budget session, I hear Annie Mae sitting right over there. And she said, you need to be looking out for your reserves and your 1 cent sales tax. You need to be, you know, she was pretty clear on how she felt about that 1 cent sales tax. And so I'm more worried about next year than I am for this year. But I see our trend.
And I think if you can come up with a 5-year plan for road and bridge like you had for solid waste this year, if you can come up with that for next year, you know, then you can make real decisions and look at it and say, you know, this is what it's projected out for 5 years, how are we gonna fund it for these next 5 years?
And you need to do that for fire.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to
You
be
know,
done
fire
everywhere.
protection, we're gonna be facing the same thing. We, you know, it needs to be done pretty much with every department.
But don't we have part of the capital replacement for fire, for the engines?
We have an approved
Yeah.
capital improvement plan, but we don't have that type of plan operationally. So, we may be in the last year of our capital improvement plan.
Right. I just thought there was a plan like.
There's a capital plan, but not an operations plan.
And I think the one that's planning on some strategic planning, you know, coming up for budgets next year, and that's stuff that can be, you know, talked about at that time.
Right. So the direction I need from the board, for Road and Bridge Department is if you want to add those 2 positions in and further decrease the balance from the common account, which would be 77,525, or if you want to leave, because Hank is wonderful. He tries to be accommodating, and he said, well, I can make it work. And I thought, you know, my only concern with not being fully staffed, or not at least having the ability to fully staff that department, is if when we have open positions, it leaves us shorthanded.
Well, this, you know, the 16,000, I'm sure a lot of people appreciate that overtime, and they count on that overtime, right?
To those,
Well, that's for solid waste. So,
No, I mean, I thought in a road, I thought that,
no, ma'am, that's charged to the solid waste budget.
You've increased that 75,000, would that then make this number
That would make,
135, 9? And that's where you begin next year, at a deficit?
it would make the transfer from secondary be 1.1 million. So it would reduce your common account to 912,226.
He's been getting by with it.
Well, how is that gonna contribute to the burnout? How is that gonna
Is that
contribute?
there?
You know, we just talked about how the overtime and the excessive working, and we're going into that cycle, two positions short.
Yeah.
You're gonna be contributing to,
Yeah, but your overtime, total is nowhere near what it would, cost for 2 FTEs.
I understand costs are different. I get that totally, but I also understood what you said in respect to the burden that it becomes of working all those hours to cover those two.
And that's,
But it's
that's
more than
true.
one person doing that, it's not.
Yes.
Two people doing that?
Well, no, that's two,
No, they're-
two positions,
well,
there's
hold on.
multiple employees.
We're talking about apples and oranges. So the overtime in the solid waste department is from full-time employees from several different departments. Some of them are from Public Works, some of them are within solid waste.
Yeah.
So, and that total for this year is over 16,000, it will be more than $16,000 by the time we finish. And that's why we increased it for next year's budget, to make sure that we were starting off where we needed to be. Now, we're able, right now in solid waste, we're able to pull some money from salaries and wages because we have some unfilled positions. But we did increase it in the budget for next year, just in case, because this is an uncomfortable trend for us to be in, where we are having such a hard time filling those positions. Now, in Road and Bridge, yes, we do have some Public Works employees who are working at the roll-off sites, but it's not all of them. So, and I understand what you're saying, Commissioner Newman. Yes, I mean, being 2 positions short doesn't help. My main concern is that if we have 2 people who resign and go somewhere else, well, now we're down 4 positions. So it's not uncommon to be down 1 or 2 positions, but, and that's why we inadvertently budgeted it that way. But then when I looked over several years of budget requests, that number has usually been either 28 or 29. So I just hate to, if we need to have those positions, I would say, let's just go ahead and fund them and see how we do. I just, I mean, we have been getting by.
Let's just do a root cause analysis. Go back, and if you increase that starting salary, then that's when hopefully you're gonna get more applicants, because that, to me, is the root cause in the first place.
I think that
If you can't get them. Now, the people that work on the weekends at the roll-off, are they volunteers? Or are they told you have to do this?
No, they're volunteers.
So they're volunteers, and does it vary?
Yeah, it does.
And have you had what kind of feedback have you had from that? Positive, negative, or what have you heard?
The only feedback I've gotten is from some folks who are working 7 days a week, who are solid waste employees.
Okay, we're working 4 days a week now, right? Is that all?
In Public Works, right.
Yeah.
But we do have we have 1 or 2 folks who are consistently working 6 or 7 days a week, from what I understand. But I don't know that it's every single week.
Okay.
And those are solid waste employees, and we're talking about Public Works. So my only concern is I just want y'all to understand that the way it's budgeted, we're 2 positions short. I don't want y'all to think you weren't given the opportunity to weigh in on this. And it would take a transfer from the common account to fund those 2 positions. But say we have 4 RMTs, and now we're gonna cut it down to 2, well, if one of them seeks employment somewhere else, then that leaves us pretty short.
I'm in favor of leaving it the way it is.
So we have, it looks like in the past, we've had 7 RMTs, so this would cut it down to 5. And Hank did say he felt like we'd be okay. I just want to bring it to your attention and give you the option to fund it if you think that's the appropriate thing to do.
Looks like everything we tackle now is pretty rough.
I would say it's signs of the times, and I'm hoping that some of this will get better. You know, a lot of this is being driven by fuel costs.
Yeah.
And, you know, if fuel costs were to come down, we'll be in a better place.
I want to say too, you know, we are seeing some things here this year that we haven't seen in the past few years, but I have been here in the past when we've had $1 million deficits that we've had to go through
Oh, yeah.
and just cut things, so I mean, it is
It's
bad, but it's, you know, I know Pam's been here when we've had some years where it was like, you took the red pen out and you said, you ain't getting this, you ain't getting this, you ain't getting this,
That's
you ain't
right.
getting this, you ain't getting this, so.
That's right.
So it's not as bad as it could be. And it is because you guys make such a good effort to, you know, balance everything and make sure we have good reserves and are prepared, so.
And we do try to solve as many problems as we can prior to the first budget workshop.
I know y'all do. Listen, my hat's off to y'all. What you go through to try to present us with a balanced budget. I can't even imagine, I can't imagine, but I appreciate what y'all put into this. And you give us options.
Right.
You know, you try to give us the best option because you see it, and that's appreciated.
So we can leave the public works budget as is. And maybe what we can do is if we see fuel prices straighten out and 6 months from now, we see that we can go ahead and fill those positions, then I can come back to the board and or, you know.
But I'm gonna change those starting salaries though if we can. I understand there'll be some fallout from it,
Okay.
but
That'd
You
be
either do it or-
$14 an hour minimum, right? That's what it's going to.
No, what I'd like, so, you know.
Bottom line is, regular employees, the bottom line salary is what?
11. It will be 11 next year. But I'm not asking to necessarily just change that starting salary for those at the bottom. What I'd like to do is for every position, raise that starting salary by the $1 an hour.
Okay, raise starting salary.
Yeah, for every position, for our new hires. And I think that will help in our recruitment. I know that, we have 2 openings in our fire department, and, you know, it depends on who you talk to. I think some people feel like if our starting salary were higher in the fire department, we could recruit more people. But then other folks say, well, we really like that health insurance. And, you know, and right now, Taylor County has a lower call volume than maybe some of the big cities. You know, we like the benefits that Taylor County has to offer. It just depends on where they are in their life. You know, health insurance has different values for different folks. And so we have a tendency to attract folks who like that health insurance, who are typically the people who feel like they may need it at some point for whatever reason. You know, starting a family, or maybe, you know, they feel like they're going to need it and they like those rich benefits. So I think if we do raise the starting salaries for each position, that it will get us in a better place. Now, and to me, it's really no different than the folks who are affected by the minimum wage. There's some angst from people who have had to work for years to get to that point, and I understand it. I completely understand it. But what we're trying to do is give every person $1 an hour raise, and that includes, you know, the people that are going to be hired after October 1st.
Well, you know, starting salaries change everywhere.
Well, that's driven by the market.
That's exactly
And
right.
we are trying to address that the best way we can. And I appreciate the board recognizing that. But we can't, as Conrad would say, we can't be the pariah for all the answers. I mean, we're doing the best we can. We're addressing our current employees. And then if we feel like if we can maybe bump up that starting salary just a bit, then, maybe we'll have more people and the current employees won't feel such a burden because we'll have other people to pick up the slack.
You can't keep it down for so long. I think back when I first, went to work at the hospital and I had a degree. And I started out at $3.75 an hour with a degree. Now, they probably start out at about 30 now. I mean, it's just, the market drives it.
You wanna go back to work?
You wanna go back to work?
So if I may, there's two more items that
Okay, go ahead.
we need to discuss. Oh, actually, three, I think.
You get a cup of coffee.
Okay. You wanna take a quick break?
Yeah.
Are we gonna try to finish this today, because y'all know that Malcolm's funeral is Monday at 10. And we have scheduled a workshop for 9 o'clock Monday, and I'm going to that funeral.
I think we can, unless y'all have something you want to bring up, if we can address these last few items,
Finish it up and I'll have to come Monday.
And we can order lunch if we need to.
Is everybody okay to stay longer?
Yeah, since we're here.
Let's finish.
Okay.
Here to finish it, that's longer. Okay.
I'll do something later if you can do it now.
What else do we have to cover, LaWanda?
We need to talk about the deficit in the general fund. We need to, did we address the deficit in MSTU?
No.
Okay, there's a small deficit in, very small in MSTU. And we do need to talk about the 1 cent sales tax request for the hospital, because I promised Mr. Barbary that I would discuss that on their behalf.
Okay, do we need to think about ordering some lunch then?
Well,
Really, you can talk all that in an hour.
If we do, if we need to think about lunch, let's.
Okay.
If you want lunch, y'all go ahead, but I'm ready to work.
I don't think this will take long to finish up.
Okay, so we don't need to order lunch in?
We can, you want to just check in about 30 minutes and see
Okay.
where we are, and then we can order lunch.
We can always have something delivered and work through it.
Let's get the coffee, he's gonna be ready to go.
Set to go.
I sure was wanting a Goodland's barbecue sandwich.
There's, I think he went down the hall. It feels like we've been working for 2 months to try to get through 2 days of workshops. Oh my gosh. I looked at Facebook last night and there was a memory from 5 years ago where you said, "You rock," and I thought, she probably doesn't think I rock anymore. Like, please hush. Stop talking to me about solid waste. I think this budget's too much.
So, no meeting for Monday, right?
Correct. Unless something changes in the next hour, but I don't think it will. I think we're good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they'll do the funeral, and then you have a workshop Tuesday night. Right, and then we'll have a meeting next Thursday, we'll have a special meeting at the village.
Kathy Bell was coming in, for us to help, you know.
Mosquitoes hatching out for you?
Do what?
Is rain hatching out these mosquitoes for you?
They coming, at least
Ain't
frogs,
just on the
frogs
south
are coming
end.
too.
Oh, no, I hear
It'll
them
take
things.
them a couple weeks to get caught up, but
Oh, yeah. I ran in, I came through a couple of them ponds, you couldn't hear yourself think. They was ready for some rain, so, they'd be, I don't have legs that long.
I hate this rain though, they fix the filter county like.
Oh.
So good, do it again.
I thought we was gonna make the corner and get by with it and understand. I was hoping. But then last day and a half,
Positions are.
it's just hammer on.
I went and got that yesterday, went 98 and we'll meet in another Norfolk County. Next month, but it's not way. Rained so hard on 98, it's going 40 miles an hour. People in the ditch, the mercury lashes on that, those even scared to drive in it, rain. I bet it rained 3 inches between Norfolk County line and across the field.
But some of the pockets, you know, the places you'll go, they ain't hardly got a thing, but a couple of them lines that came in was full. It's showing up.
One thing to look. It's 4 foot, I put a marker down.
So either way.
Farming, I got there, 4 foot high right now, it was a month ago.
So it's come up a foot. You think you got a foot a week, or you got all that at one shot?
But you're gonna.
No, it was over the last few weeks, you know.
So about a foot a week then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a low ground level going on.
That's what, I think that's what contributes to a lot of this, when folks say, the water ain't going anywhere. Well, it can't,
So
so
what
it
I'll
can't.
do, what we'll
We
do,
have updates there.
You, well, it's point, it can't run off, you know, so.
including our own.
People out there by the mill.
But,
So
what I'm going to do is update the pay scale for every position.
Well, if you get one of them rains like he's talking about,
Our
it'll be right
minimum
back up
was
there on the
11,
porch.
it will now be
So,
12.
Yeah.
I looked 6 ways from Sunday was somewhere.
Something like that.
It's covered. Budget, it's budgeted per dollar.
Yeah.
So our new
I think about them rain, you know, them getting caught up out there on the go, but
We can get a look at it right now.
oh my
Yeah,
God.
it's 11 now.
Well,
Some people.
Almost yours is,
it's
but they have to go to 11.
Right.
That's fine. Well, if they have to go to 11, then they're budgeted at 11, they're not budgeted.
They're at 14 now, they're gonna be 15.
I know, I just think
That's,
that.
I hate, man, time you plan on something and then it does that rain, if you had the crews moving around, you
That's not
got.
how.
I can remember when I think it was.
Make
That's how you're
I think I never walked it, I'll put it, it's 6 feet in your vehicle, it's all 19 out there.
Buy a cheap mirror to go in this refrigerator.
Yes.
Go to the dollar store and get one for $1.
I have one in there.
Come across here.
I mean, that was.
I had them, they asked, the guy asked me about
Same thing
that.
when I went in
When I
there.
went
You
to
went to
Florida.
the like, I can't tuck
I
my
think it's that
shirt in,
baby,
like I'm
I'm
having
like-
to try and make sure.
If it was that baby, you wouldn't be thinking, that baby, you'd be in your floor.
Because I know my name.
I mean, I don't understand how much that canal does, but I looked at it, or a guy flew it. And that may make an canal during that time when it was so wet over there. There wasn't no, I mean, the canal wasn't really full. So I'm like, if it ain't sitting there, it's doing its job. You know, so,
It drains the east side, I mean, the east side of the canal, it don't drain the west
with the Perry side.
on there.
That's right. I agree. But you know, when they had that trouble here in Perry with that crossing, the sinkhole out there, I wondered if a lot of that was underground, with that aqueduct too and all that. Yeah, but it was supercharged.
Look at that creek when you leave here today, and it running like it used to when you had water. And there it is.
What?
It goes underground, too many places, it's not.
Well, we're making progress.
Making it on about progress.
I would agree with that.
Progress.
I'm not a hydrologist.
Look at it, see what's running. Used to when it was high, rain like this, that thing.
It'd be going. And it'd go right on. and you could see it. But I agree on it.
We go through.
It's kind of-
All right.
And then.
doesn't affect me on it, but-
Trying to think of what we just did, but they would now, they would on October first. No.
One,
Sure.
what we got? Fence quote, I see $21,000. That's the patch holding fence or new fence?
Put it where? What? I'm sorry.
On environmental services, Beacon miles,
That's for new fencing.
how many? All three of them?
6 sites.
Is that
6 sites. So the average price of that, if you divide that by 6, is $27,000. That may be a little high, but the last quote that we got just for Shady Grove was $21,000. So that one may be a little bit high, but we're looking out for 5 years, and it's just difficult to know.
Is that because they go in there and cut the fence? I keep hearing that one down at Carlton Cemetery got a hole in it, been there ever since, and I don't know, Carlton, not Carlton, but the, Harrison Blue.
That's a brand new fence.
They cut that one, I think, the week after the whole fence was done, I think they were prepared, but they just go right back and put it again.
It's just, it happens all the time.
I had, caught one in there one night. Anyway, I think they came out. It was, vehicle out there sitting waiting. Big line up there on the hill and flipped it off. Anyway, they come out and got it, but it just, it was there.
That is an ongoing,
I was just blown away at just at some of the stuff that they say that they're in there with. Mind blowing.
Yeah, you're talking about the security cameras, what you want.
What's that?
Talking about put some security cameras in.
Yeah, some of those places.
I see we had, I saw entry at $750 a camera. Did I see that in this somewhere?
probably.
What do you got?
Okay, so, you wanna go ahead and talk, you want me to talk about this? Sure. So as you know, this current year is the last year that Doctors Memorial Hospital will be receiving the quarter distribution of the 1 cent sales tax. They made a presentation to y'all, and submitted a letter asking that the board continue funding that for capital equipment and improvements. They didn't say for how many years. I know in the past, the board has granted that in 3-year cycles. They're at the 3rd year of their 3-year allocation. And I got a call from the chairperson of the DMH board yesterday asking, if the board would consider that request. So I let him know I would bring it up to y'all and see if you wish to continue that funding or not. They have about $1 million.
It's on 473, page 473.
Yeah.
They have about $1 million unspent. They do have a plan to expend that. And obviously, Mr. Schmidt presented his needs to the board on Monday. So, the question is, do you wish to put that in the budget for next fiscal year?
Let me ask you something. How much money we talking about? How much that collect?
25% will bring in about $550,000.
The hospital gets how much?
That would be
550.
I'd support, continue on with the other year. I mean, I know Mr. Smith's come in, for about a year ago? And has come in to make some positive changes for this hospital, and I've heard a lot of positive and changes that's been made. I believe the agreement was to go on through or there may be a verbal agreement, was to go through a 3-year, this being the last year, so I would support continuing this next year to allow them to, that would help them to.
So are you saying that you wish to include it just for one more year?
I would say one more year, just
Okay.
with the initial agreement now, I mean, I think, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't speak for
Okay,
year 2 and year 3 from now, because I don't know what that looks like.
right.
I got a question. If this I don't know the words, but looking at doing the evaluation of the status of the physical building out there, if that comes back with quite a few deficiencies, and it's our property, how are we gonna fund that?
It's my understanding that maintenance is the responsibility of the hospital.
Oh,
And
so
that's in their
there
lease.
needs to be, I guess I'm confused because I sort of thought from the presentation the other day that the findings would be our responsibility, but that's not true then.
I guess it depends on how you define maintenance.
He did have $500,000 in there for a roof repair.
In his capital
in
plan.
his- In his plan.
Mhm.
So he did have that in that plan. I don't remember. I don't have. I took
Year
that out.
24.
Year 24.
Right.
That's a part of that. I don't remember what the total cost was on that plan. What was the total cost?
$618,972 per year, 24,
What
25.
about the total capital?
That's the total for that year.
I know, what about
The
the
total, the extended total was 2.8 million.
So that's what the,
Would that come out of what they get from us, that 1 cent sales?
I believe
They
that.
would cover that with that?
That's the expectation, I would think.
And some of these items actually need to be removed that they have in their plan because it's not considered capital. The study that they want is not considered capital, so they'll have to fund the study, or the board will have to, or they'll ask the board to fund that study. But, those costs didn't look to be the bulk of that 2.8 million.
And Gary, you sort of suggested the other day that we try to look at suggesting maybe that we should think about keeping some of that? Is
Yeah,
that
so I
what you
mean,
were saying, as
yeah.
our chief financial officer?
right, so I mean, the 1 cent right now, it's basically, it's what you have. Like if you wanted to do a bond or something, to build something or construct something, that's the revenue that you have for it. And, there's nothing else to dedicate. So if you get in a situation where you did need a building, or you need to build something, or you needed to do something, if you got that dedicated out for 4 or 5 years, or part of it dedicated out for 4 or 5 years, then you're not gonna be able to pledge that money or use that money. So that was just my caution, was that let's just have a plan to know that that's money that we need to keep, because it's money that you're gonna need for future stuff, and not to get into, like I didn't like to see the 408,000 for the EMS. I didn't like to see that going to the general fund, and get out of this at some point. Have a plan to just get this money back where we have complete control over it, so that we can use it for things.
Yeah.
Like you may need a new courthouse, or I think the sheriff talked about a, public safety building or something like that. You may need something like that in the future. I mean, that's the 1 cent sales tax is what's going to.
Yeah. Well, I wanna help everybody that we can help, for sure. But then I don't want to be in a situation where we have to increase our property taxes in order to cover ourselves, because if we keep going, this is my concern, if we keep going, if we keep using these reserves, we're gonna get to a point where we have 0 reserves. And then if our money's tied up, what are we gonna do? And you can only go to 10 mills, God forbid if we ever decide to go to 10 mills, I won't ever vote for that, but I don't know, I mean, I wanna help as many people as we can, but we have to look after the county also.
So right
I don't know.
now, I'm sorry, right now you got you're getting 2.2 million a year. I mean, right now, you've dedicated out 958,000 of it, right?
That's right.
Right now, you're committed to that, not including the hospital, but that ended this year. So you'd add another 550 to that, if you're gonna give them another year. And, so that's just a, you know, those are just the numbers there.
Well, what about what about the possibility if it wasn't 25%?
Well, I mean, this is the other possibility too, is if someone has a capital expense and they come to you and they say, we've got this capital expense and you've kept this money, fit it into this, capital fund, you can do a one-time purchase for them and say, hey.
Control of the money.
Right, say, hey, okay, well, we think that's a good one-time purchase for you, you know? If the hospital comes in and says, well, we need this and it's 300,000, you say, well, we've got this 1 cent sales tax that we're setting aside 300,000, that's a good capital, we think that's a good one-time capital expense. Or whoever, or if the sheriff comes and said, I needed, you know, 4 new vehicles or whatever, you can say, you know, you can turn it into instead of designating it, use it as a.
Request.
Right, just say, if they want to come with a capital request, come with a capital request, and you've got money, if you know, funded it, if you need it.
Then you could compare that against whatever other need we may have that's might be more
Right.
critical or
You
may
might
not.
decide- you might
I don't know.
decide
And
that you need
I'm
it
just
somewhere else.
talking, that's, you know,
Or you might decide that you want to bond something, and you need to use this revenue to pay that bond back, because there may be something you needed.
Well, there's another option. I mean, they have $1 million unspent. You could ask them to expend what they have and then come to the board and, you know, maybe next budget year. Because I think the way Chris explained it to me, he thought he could spend, you know, 600 and, you know, part of it one year, part of it the next year. And if you just say, okay, we'll spend what you have, and then come to the board and ask for another allocation, maybe next budget year, then that may be a consideration.
and that could be a specific request. We need this. Instead of, we just have a certain amount that goes to us irregardless, but it would be a specific request, like,
You know, I think the other thing too is, do we really know where the hospital's financials are? I mean, do we know, do they have money, do they not have money? You know, I don't know. You know, does anybody know?
He presented an update as to, you know, their status recently, I believe.
I know they got a lot of CARES Act money, you know?
how
Yeah,
much?
I think they got 11 million, and then they didn't spend it all, and they have to get some of it back.
I don't believe they expensed everything they were awarded.
Right. So, that's, you know, I mean, so I just think they should provide some financial numbers that say we're in the hole, or we're, you know what I mean, we're struggling or whatever, you know? But you're not obligated to give them that.
We're not obligated under any kind of contract, it's just a matter.
No, you're not
I'm just
obligated.
saying for the next year that I guess that they said was agreed upon.
I'm
That's
just
what that
saying,
ends- that
what
ends
Mr.
September.
England said, I mean, we could, that's what you're trying to do, you're trying to, in case we needed it next year, we wouldn't have to give that money by going by year. I'm in favor of giving it to them this year, but it's only for 1 year.
I'm not speaking for year 2 and 3 and beyond that, because I feel pretty confident that I've spoken outside of this, that we may need to either bring that back and under our arms to do just what Noel was saying here, that expend it based on the question.
Well, that would give them $1.5 million by, you know, basically, I mean, we don't want them to give back what they have. So if they have $1 million, a little over $1 million now, and you commit for another year, then that would put it at $1.5 million.
Well, $1 million is a lot of money to be sitting on. That would probably carry them for the next year.
Well, I guess really not knowing what do they have plans for that money, and I guess that's not really.
Well, they do. They brought I mean, they have $2.8 million in needs that they presented.
They had it all listed out, what they were gonna repair and stuff.
If you look at those 2 years, that'd be 22, 23, that cost is is doing, about $1,000,008. So if we were to commit to fund the upcoming year, then I believe that will help them, given what they have and what we're gonna fund, to be able to take care of these needs. Now, some of those aren't capital, so that money will reduce to some
A
extent.
little bit, yeah.
I think that gives us the latitude, if we have a need that comes up that we don't know about now, for not this upcoming year, but the next one, that we can still fund what they requested, given what they've outlined here. So I would support funding their upcoming year with this money, and we can reevaluate. If they've got great needs and we can help, we can help. If we've got other needs otherwise, or something else gets presented, I think it's the best case going forward.
Yeah, I just want to mention one other thing too. I think that, the 408,000 here that went towards EMS was also intended to help them too, because they were operating EMS and losing money off of it. So you guys dedicated 408,000 of this 1 cent to EMS so that they wouldn't have that, burden and loss in their area. So you've already, made some efforts there to help them out also, so.
And I believe when I asked them how much that was, I don't know that they had an exact answer, but it seems like they were operating at a pretty significant loss
Yes.
when they operated EMS.
I think they did.
The hospital?
Yes,
Yeah, they said it was.
they did. I just can't recall the exact
Well,
number.
they wanted to give it away to us, to somebody. They didn't care who got it.
They're doing a good job out there right now. What I'm hearing from the general public, I haven't got a complaint once about the hospital. I used to get them every week. And they're doing a good job, and that's why I support them for this year. Because they turn things around out there, and they got it going in the right direction, what I'm hearing. And your waiting time when you go out there now, and I've been out there a couple times this year already, and to get lab work and I went to the emergency room one time with the issue. They got you right in there. Usually you sit there forever, but they got it going on out there. Now, Chris has really turned that hospital around.
Yeah, I've heard some better things too, but they don't have the burden of the ambulance anymore, because from what they presented to us, that was, cost that, they had to spend a lot of money with that. So we've relieved them of that burden by taking that away from them. So things should have improved, and they have.
When they, have an issue with the maintenance, TMA is what I heard, they would give them 50% everything that they needed to do some major maintenance over the period of years. That's what I've always heard of. TMA did fund them when they needed funding, as far as half of what they gave. But they have to come up with half of the issue. Like when they rebuilt that boiler and stuff, well, we actually rebuilt both boilers out there. And, they handled it,
What about this list that we got then? Do you think they pay half of that?
I'm not sure about the list, about paying half of the things they hadn't done, but just like things they had to have, like they had to have a boiler to, be able to do surgery out there, they have to have that hot water, that kind of thing. But they're doing a good job, I'm on board,
Well, let me tell you this. I carried a fellow out there, called me and told me need to go to the emergency room. I carried him out there at 6 o'clock yesterday morning. And, he called me back, his family called him back 8 o'clock last night, asked him, how did you get here? So we had to bring him. There's a link between EMS and the hospital about transportation to another hospital. It just haven't been quite worked out yet. I've heard several complaints about that. Did you know anything about that?
That's something we discussed with y'all. There is a policy in place, and per our contract, we utilize, or DMH utilizes the 911 trucks only for emergencies. So if it is a non-emergent transfer, then either the hospital who is receiving the patient can send an ambulance for them, or they can wait for an interfacility truck that usually is dispatched out of Lake City, and that truck will pick them up. But we do not use our 911 trucks for non-emergency transfers or for mutual aid.
Well, let me tell you that. Monday, I think it was, or Saturday, no, on the 6th, Dr. Nelson put in a feeding tube. It was already a feeding tube then, it'd been there about 15 years. And it started giving him problems, so he said, I put another one in. He did, and it's been about, I think it was July 6th. Well, that hole that he left open, or the one he pulled that tube out, it was skin. Stuff started coming in. It was bleeding, I know, for the last 2 or 3 days. And I carried him to the hospital. He called me, because I was commissioner, he wanted me to see it. And he had blood that he had been in, he was in excruciating pain. So I carried him out there, but, you know, eventually they put me out. So I had to leave to go to Tallahassee about my brother, and I called him last night. He said that he had to provide transportation for this particular patient to get to Tallahassee. And he's in Tallahassee Memorial Hospital now, so I just wonder.
It must not have been what they deemed on that list as an emergency. They've got specific things listed. This is an emergency, and if it falls under this, right, am I right? If it doesn't fall under what the doctors have, they just deemed an emergency, then they don't do it.
I mean, they'll do it, we don't use our 911 trucks for that.
Yeah.
Because then that may leave someone who has an emergency without transportation.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, they still carry them, it just, I mean, they may have to wait for a transfer truck. And I think we've gotten those, the response time much better on those.
How, do you have, are you still collecting the data? I'd like for you to share that with us every month. Are we still, routinely going to Lafayette County? So that's been stopped? Okay. So things have gotten better in terms of
I think there were
taking our ambulances out of service for somebody else when we need them?
I think there were maybe 2 mutual aid responses last month. I'll have to go back and check.
They bought them another ambulance over at what I heard.
Okay,
They bought them, they went ahead and
okay,
bought them another ambulance where they could handle that situation.
okay.
What I was told.
So I think what we need is some kind of direction from the board about the 1 cent sales tax for DMH. What do you wish to do?
I would supply for the upcoming year. I would agree. They've generated and demonstrated the need, so I would suggest and support supplying that for the upcoming year.
I will too.
I support
I'm good with it.
it. For
So-
another year.
And then, before you talk about general fund real quick, I would like to see if I can get a feeling from the board, the new fire station on Pisgah. As you know, there is a deficit for that fire station. And, you know, we've discussed it several times. We've applied for a legislative appropriation for the balance. We did not receive that. And I just wanted to get some guidance from the board. If there is an MSTU reserves for capital, we have 974,243. That could be used to complete that station if that's the direction the board wants to go, just to bring it to your attention. I mean, we can wait maybe another year, and see if we can find another funding source. But I did want to bring to your attention, there is some money in reserves. If you want to go ahead and move forward, we can put it out to bid again and see where the numbers come in.
I hate to,
The deficit, the last time we checked, was about $700,000, I believe.
let's see if, for me, let's see if we can maybe get that appropriated to us next year. I'm very leery of depleting our reserves. I want to be very cautious about that. I just don't think that's good business to deplete your reserves.
One of the things me and Danielle's been looking at is a reserve policy, like a fund balance policy. Like adopting a policy that says we want to keep our reserves at a certain level.
Yes.
And so, we've been reviewing that, and probably sometime this year, the workshop will present that to you guys for to look at and see if it's something y'all are interested in, or, you know, something similar to that. Just to have it, you know, to make sure that we are keeping our reserves at a point where we feel like we're comfortable. Because at home, all advisors tell you to have 3 months worth of emergency funds, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, that makes sense. You know, good practice for the county to do the same thing, 25% of whatever your expenditures are in your reserve or something like that. Some kind of policy like that. But anyway, we've been looking at them, and we'll be, bringing that here, you know, to y'all sometime within the next year to see if you're interested in looking at something like that.
That's what I've been saying all day. We know, we need to, we need to run this just like we run our business at home, or at least most of us that are responsible. You know, we don't want to have to file bankruptcy, okay? We don't do that.
You could borrow the money, go ahead and finish the fire station and let money out of reserves pay the payment on the loan to later on. And I mean, that would get the fire station done, because it's not gonna get no cheaper. I mean, everything that they're gonna build right now, I haven't seen it, it's not gonna get you cheaper than that. Price of materials come down a little bit, but it hasn't come down a lot.
I just don't want to mess with our reserves. I'm hoping that Representative Schoaf will come through for us and the governor doesn't veto it. I'm very leery about even making payments out of a reserve. That's going to deplete it sooner or later because we're not putting any more into it.
Okay, then, I think all we have left is to address.
Is there a deficit in that?
There is a small deficit in the MSTU of $23,000. So, I don't know where, in looking at the departments and the expenditures that are in the MSTU, where we would get that outside of reducing reserve for capital to $23,000. The balance,
How much?
$23,000.
Yeah, deficit.
Well, we need to fund it.
We have in reserve for equipment, 974,243, and then, of course, we still have the reserve for contingency of 120,000 and our reserve for cash balance. So that would not be a huge impact on our reserves.
Could we ask everybody to, divide that up and to see how much everybody would have to cut to give us that, so we don't have to use reserves? It would hit everybody very hard.
Well, these are only our MSTU departments, which would be fire,
Fire, building department, planning department, code enforcement, and animal control.
those are pretty tight budgets. And we're already funding capital out of 1 cent sales tax for the fire department, so.
We're also funding a truck for animal control, is that right?
Out of
Is that
1
coming out
cent.
of 1 cent?
Yes.
Wondering what?
A truck for animal control, out of the 1 cent.
Do we understand what the main driver of this deficit is?
Part of it is probably fuel, for fire department.
Yeah, county fire went up a pretty good bit.
Yeah.
What the difference is, you know, 539,000 this year.
So the, what page is that?
367.
And those are ones, 342.
Well, I understand, yeah, if we got a deficit now, then what caused it and how do we avoid it?
It's
Yeah,
probably.
if you look at page 367 on the right side, you can see these, you can see the difference here from last year to this year. And you can see where,
What page are you on?
367. 367. So just for instance, county fire went up $539,390. Not, you know, some of that's their salary, of course.
Yeah, just their personal services increased 121,000.
Right.
Because you have to remember with county fire, they're considered, their retirement is a higher percentage. So their retirement,
The highest percentage.
higher, because they're high risk, so it's a higher percentage.
Let me look at their fuel. Hang on. It's on the-
Their fuel increased by 100%.
So that's not, they didn't even go up to 150.
They didn't even, they didn't go up to 150. They went from 20,000 to 40,000 in fuel.
I really hate taking, I hate looking about putting the third person budget.
But then is the animal control truck being paid for out of one cent?
Yeah.
You look at, on that same page, you look up the city reimbursement on animal control, they don't split the difference with they. They're not doing their half.
It's not supposed to be half. It's driven by population and calls, so it's not 50%. Because
Well, I mean,
part of that formula is population, and the other portion of that is calls. So it's the cost, and then there's a formula that's applied that takes into consideration the number of calls for the city and the population.
But they're not funding part of the truck, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, no. Well, they would be, wouldn't they? Did you count that as?
I don't do their budget, Gary does it.
No, I mean, when we ask for reimbursement, do we ask for reimbursement for capital expenditures as well? It's not just the operating budget, it's the
For
total
the
budget.
city? For animal
control.
I don't do that, Gary does, so I don't know, he does all the formulas and everything, I would have to
I
ask
don't
him.
think they base it just on operations.
Because what they're contributing isn't going up, but, I mean, maybe when he does this stuff, he may ask for it, I don't know, but.
I don't know, we haven't had a new vehicle in so long. I'd have to go back and look at that.
So that's something we could check into, if they can pay for their 30% of that truck. I don't know if that's part of the deal or not, but.
where did that deal come from? Is that something that we set in the past?
We have an interlocal agreement with them.
Well, I mean,
I don't think we.
I think it needs to be 50-50 myself, but there's a world of dogs they put with inside the city limit.
Well, I think you said that part of the formula is where the calls are from.
World of dogs. World of them. You see them cross the street. And then chase them.
Everybody lives too close, they got more issues on
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you something too, people out in the country bring all those cats up here and dump them out of the city. I got about 3 of them.
I just want the city to pay their fair share, is what I'm saying. I agree.
They do. According to our agreement.
So last year, it looks like our expenditures in animal control were $214,695, and the city paid
60, so.
$65,600. Of the 214.
Who keeps up with these numbers?
We do.
With how many calls there are and all that?
Oh, yeah.
In other words, when they pick up, it's documented every time they do something
It is.
inside the city limit.
Yes, because we have to document that in great detail to the
That'll
city.
be blown for about $41,000 some odd dollars. Yeah,
For the,
to bring it to half. What the difference would be between that 65 and half.
yeah, but that's not what was agreed upon, and that's not what formula is being used.
It's not being used for half.
No, right now, the agreement is based off of population, which is usually about 70-30. The county has 70% of the population, so it's 30. And then on the calls.
Right, and the
And
calls.
then the amount of calls, so there's a formula that the county and the city agreed on a long time ago that takes all that into consideration to come up with how much of it they fund. So
Might not be really anything to get there.
other than, it doesn't look like maybe we're including the truck, can we include, because we don't normally purchase capital in animal control. So unless we can include that into that formula and get a little bit more money out of them to help
I think
everybody.
road service is their service area, then,
Yeah.
why not?
Well, we should take the total of what it costs to operate that department.
But that's
And
not,
that includes vehicles and things, whatever it takes, and then, use that factor of if it's 30/70.
but that's totally, that's not going to help the deficit. That's got nothing to do with the deficit because we're using 1 cent sales tax
Right.
to buy the vehicle. So that's not going to help the situation we're talking about, which is the deficit of 23.
That's still the right thing to do.
No, I understand, but I just wanted to make sure that we knew that wasn't going to affect the deficit.
We ain't gonna help us out in this situation.
No, sir.
Them policies were set a long time ago, it's kind of like trash situation. It was set a long time ago too, and you know where we at with that, you know. I'm just, that's the reason I brought that up, I wanted to look at that, you know, everybody get that, make sure we're getting apples for apples, you know.
So we might see an option other than to balance it from the reserves. Minutes.
Well, I checked the line item for county fire for fuel, but even though, you know, in funds where I knew it may be an issue, we increased the fuel by 150%, and fire, we only increased it by 100%. So I don't know that there's a lot of excess to take from fuel. I hate to cut the fire department.
I don't wanna do that either. I really don't.
I think we would just end up coming back to the board and possibly asking for funding to get through the end of the year. And I know that, animal control is pretty lean.
Well, maybe we'll get it back, maybe things will get.
Oh, yeah, well,
Maybe things will get better, they're getting better now.
But I'll check the interlocal agreement. I don't know that it's just operating expenditures, but I'll double check that.
So you need instruction today to take the balance this from the reserves?
Is that 23?
3,000, is that what the feel of the board is, or?
I don't think we got any choice, not a good choice. I would not gut county fire.
Oh,
No.
it's already lean now.
So I mean, I believe the only choice is to balance reserves.
Then that just leaves, general fund.
And when we left for Monday, we had got it down to 51,975. And then you said that,
So the undersheriff texted me and said that they could reduce their operations by an additional 50,000.
And that would be down by $1,000.
And then the only other question that I'm aware of is the budget increase for TCDA, going from 100,000 to 118,000. I didn't know if y'all wanted to discuss that, or if you had any feelings about that.
I'd like to discuss it, because I believe they've got a surplus that could fund the difference in the request. So I think they have about a $35,000 surplus, and they've requested an $18,000 increase. So it would seem to me like if we maintain what we've committed to fund them at 100,000, then they still have a surplus in order to meet any unforeseen needs or what they may budget for as a need.
And
And we can look at it next
And
year.
I also believe they submitted a audit that showed that they had some funds.
Yeah, they've got about in 1 year, they didn't expense $100,000. So they've got about $35,000, I believe.
That was just last year, but they've got years prior to that, they didn't expend everything either, but.
So that's a greater surplus than 35.
Now, some of those funds, I think, are restricted. Are you taking that into consideration?
No, I haven't looked at I know that there was a number, but I haven't looked at it, to see, how much of it's restricted, or they may have a plan for it, I don't know, they may have it.
Well, from what I recall, there were some property sales that.
Out of the airport.
Right, right. So I don't think they use those for their operating budget.
Well, we just discussed that the hospital had a million, sitting on $1 million. And that's good, I'm for going ahead with the hospital. But we're talking about somebody that's sitting on a little bit and talking about cutting them. So, don't do one, let's be consistent with what we do.
Well, the hospital's more important than that office down there.
I don't disagree. I'm just saying what we're doing, we need to be consistent.
I think in that budget request, $10,000 of that was supplied health insurance for that entity, and I don't think that any of our other entities similar fall under the health insurance plan, am I correct?
No, none of them do. So,
So
no.
if none of them do, then we can't for sure go off into the $10,000 with one unless you're willing to do it with the rest.
Well, I would say that, just to be clear, like if you're talking about the chamber, that the funding for the chamber does include health insurance coverage. I don't know if it does or not. I better not speak out of turn. I don't know if we fund health insurance for any other entities or not.
We do know that they're not on our health insurance.
Yeah, they're not.
So they have their own health insurance and they're funding that, however they're funding their own health insurance is how they're doing it. So I think that was the request for them to pay for them to get their employee health insurance.
So I want to clear up something then, and because I've heard this and heard that. And so it was told to me that when that position was advertised, that it was advertised with benefits. Is that true or not?
I believe, I'm trying to recall, but I believe it was advertised with that health insurance was available.
And
Trying to
whose
recall.
responsibility then if it was, who put the advertisement out?
CCDA.
Okay, so whose responsibility then is it to fulfill that obligation? If you advertise that this job comes with benefits, who is responsible for paying it?
CCDA. But I believe their stance would be they're funded by the board, so they're asking for an increase not only for health insurance, but from what I recall, they applied an 8% inflation rate to all of their other expenditures and came up with $18,000.
And we haven't cut anybody else through this whole budget process.
Well, the sheriff has reduced his
He
budget.
did that to me.
Right, and then, in all fairness, Public Works did, basically give up 2 positions. So, but I don't know that we've reduced anybody else's budget request.
Their elections cut hers, 30-something thousand dollars.
Right. Is that for capital?
I would say the funding that the TCDA has, the additional funding they have is probably there to do, and that I don't think we need to make a change this year, maybe it would be something to look at again next year.
I'd certainly be willing to look at that. I mean, if they demonstrate that the inflation has hit them in the ways that they expect, I don't mind taking a look at that next year. But I'm just looking at what's there and the request, and I think they have nearly twice as much as they requested to cover those potential costs. So that's what I'm seeing. I'm not trying to cut them at all. I mean, I appreciate the work they do. I don't want that to come across as something that's not there, but I just feel like with the funding that's provided at 100,000 and the surplus that they have of nearly 36,000, that would more than cover those potential unforeseen costs.
He did say he wasn't gonna fly to New Jersey.
To Boston.
He said he'd drive.
He said he'd drive, he don't have.
Driving the shit.
He's driving halfway. And I appreciate that. I don't blame him either, as a matter of fact.
I feel the same way you do, Mr. Newman, on that.
I'm just gonna have to respectfully disagree.
Don't you sit on that boat?
So,
Keep it at 100,000.
keep it at 100,000. Okay, then the next question is, does that mean that you do not wish for the sheriff to reduce his budget by the full 50, or just the difference between the 18 and what we need? The balance.
I'd say if it helps with their potential, fuel expenses, that we can balance with the difference between the two. That would help the sheriff. And I certainly appreciate all the work that everybody's put into trying to balance.
One is protection.
More disagrees, that's fine, but that's where I'm at with.
And that would be with funding 2 additional positions for the sheriff's office.
I think the difference was where we made the balance was the operational expenses.
Correct.
It was that.
Right, I just want to make sure I can clarify. So he would keep the,
Sheriff gonna get the 2 positions he wants?
right, he'd keep the 2 deputies.
Yes.
Okay, but you did say something like $58,000 he was willing to reduce?
Oh, he's reduced substantially, right. Is it about, what is it?
It was 356, 344.
And his original request was,
The increase was over $1 million, wasn't it?
so he requested an increase of over $1 million, and now he's reduced that by that 3.
But that's still provides for the. I'm certainly support that.
And say we just balance the budget out of the reserve of $4,000 or $5,000.
No, we're.
I think we'd be
Oh, it
balanced.
would balance, it would balance even. It would balance.
Not bothering the reserve.
Correct.
Sounds good to me.
You have anything else? Gary, you have?
The only other thing that I have is next Thursday would be the special meeting at 9 o'clock to set the millage rate.
Set the millage rate
You have to vote to set the millage
next
next
Thursday.
Thursday.
And nothing on next Tuesday, right?
Tuesday night, we have a workshop, just our regular July board
At
workshop.
6.
At 6. So,
So we don't have to have the workshop Monday. Because we finished
We
everything.
have to have that workshop next week.
which one?
Wednesday.
You're talking about the regular workshop at 6 o'clock?
There's one item we have a couple of items on the agenda. But, I mean, I
I don't mind waiting if it's something that's necessary.
No. We did have some members of the public who wanted to speak at the July workshop,
Yes. Okay.
but,
The meeting is on then. I just hit it on my birthday, that's all.
What can bring you a cake?
say.
Well, I got one other thing, I know you all know this, but you don't understand that this will be advertised as a tax increase, even though you didn't increase the millage rates, because the millage rates, the last year's millage rates, produced the same amount of, an additional amount of taxes, that it is advertised as a tax increase. So,
Because of market values.
right, because the market values were producing more taxes now without you changing the millage. Some people get confused about that, but it is actually a tax increase, but not a millage increase.
That's right.
Okay.
No millage increase, but the property values have gone up, which is good, but you gotta pay for that.
So if their taxes are going up, it's because their values went up. And, okay, solid waste.
All right, anything else?
So we won't be back until Tuesday at 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. Monday, we finished on the day, so we have.